Good day, dear viewers, and welcome to another episode of Visite. Nice to see you're back. And I want to start right away with a very recent email and a problem that many people report in the winter months or in the cold season again and again. Namely, a young woman from Germany writes, "Only in winter and during the cold months, I feel my skin tearing open. My nails or my fingertips peel, my hair gets pretty dry. This time of year, it flakes, everything is brittle, tense and itches." And she asks what she can do. And actually, as part of my answer, I would like to draw your attention to 4 things here that maybe fit and have to come together. That the body has an intact, resistant, immunogenic, high-quality skin in its ability to regulate. And you know our skin, our mucous membranes, of course, they are all contact surfaces, portals of entry. If the body is no longer up to the task at this time of year, what can be behind it? And the first thing I have to tell you is a mineral that has become indispensable to me in recent years, which is the zeolite. Zeolite is a rock mineral from the Andes, a highly interesting mixture containing silica. The silica is the second most common substance on our Earth's crust. It contains colloidal silicon, and it contains the natural clinotyllite, the zeolite. And in summary, you can say zeolite. This zeolite is a multifactorial mineral rock, which is of incredible importance for the human organism. And we can always also determine and measure these efficiencies in the silica. And it's a disproportionate proportion of people where I notice that the structures cannot regenerate themselves in terms of function. And what are the climactic conditions that the body can provide these things again and again? This zeolite is familiar to many because it has a very binding function, and there are different preparations in Germany or in Europe when taken orally as a powder. Then you have a high binding capacity for toxins. They bind heavy metals, but they also bind histamine in the intestine. They also bind fungi. They also bind bacteria, parasites. So this zeolite has a very strong detoxifying function. But that is only one thing to free the body from free radicals or from pollutants. On the other hand, the resilience in the extracellular space, and thus the extracellular matrix, that's what it's called, is kept in its function and in its balance. Zeolite regulates our mineral metabolism. This is the most crucial question and message. And that's why it's also responsible for the extracellular. It's called electricity, so a cell membrane potential that has to build up again and again every day, every second. And for that you need a healthy ratio of potassium and minerals so that the cell can keep up with the exchange. The entire acid-base balance is linked to it. That means with that it is granted to what extent my blood has a stable pH milieu regulation of 7.3, 7.4. How strong is the need for minerals to buffer this blood again and again? The pH in the blood is 7.3, 7.4, and the body will not argue with you. But it will guarantee you that as a primary task every day, because going down and up would no longer be compatible with life. In the bile, it's different. The pH should be from 6.5 to 8.2. In the stomach, from 1 to 4. In the pancreas, from 7.5 to 8.1. In the large intestine, from 5.5 to 6.4, and so on. In the saliva, still different. That means anywhere there's a mineral deficit can cause pH milieu regulation disorders. However, the body will then show you a dysregulation through inflammation or other symptoms. But in blood, it does not argue with us. All skin care, all skin regeneration, mucosal regulation is dependent on the mineral pool. And therefore, the whole protein biosynthesis, also protein structural improvements are here, are supported by an optimal mineral environment. And of course, our entire metabolic process. That may just tell you at the beginning that we use this zeolite in a very high quality. And please always pay attention that there are no aluminium residues. Be sure to also take zeolite in the oral form. There are capsules of 400 milligrams, and we say you can take up to 3,000 to 4,500 milligrams a day. The capsule may also be open to take it as a powder. Insalivate the powder or drink it diluted with a little liquid. That means, firstly, you set a good regulatory balance if you keep an eye on your mineral balance here. The other thing is that cell regeneration or collagen fibres, fibroblasts, elastoblasts, so the entire regeneration problem is also zinc dependent. We have already discussed quite a lot about zinc. 400 enzymes are not sufficiently supplied if zinc is missing. And I have to ask again and again to have your zinc level measured well within your intracellular activity of the immune situation, especially today and now. And if you have that measured in whole blood, then you know how much zinc remains in the cell. And a zinc substitution must be done several times a day because we simply cannot store zinc in our organism. Coupling it with vitamin C makes it even easier to absorb. And with 50 milligrams, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, then please take a look. If the zinc level is well raised, wound healing or porosity can also be significantly affected. And the structure and the hair quality gets better. That's one thing. On the other hand, it is colder in winter. And we used to believe that fat alone serves as energy storage. It's not like that at all. In the 20s, at the Joslin Diabetes Centre at Harvard University, for example, diabetics were recommended a 70% fat diet with 5% carbohydrates and 20% protein. The whole thing, of course, evolved over the course of the development, also over the course of industrial development, and especially in the 50s and 60s. Margarine was invented very early, much earlier, but the great aggression against butter evolved. It was condemned there. None of this justified. And we really have to correct ourselves medically today that by increasing the carbohydrate content and reducing the fat percentage, we got into quite a situation. I read a beautiful sentence. The butter has been accused in the courtroom, but it was never sentenced. And of course, it has not lost anything in terms of its naturalness and its high quality. But at least something has to be adjusted in our thinking. And please also think now during this time of optimal supply and sufficient fat. Because, of course, we have, and we will perhaps come back to that, we have the big question of saturated fat. We have the big question of single and multiple unsaturated fatty acids. But the important thing is the fat. Without the fat, we just can't speed up our metabolism. So a carbohydrate meal that you combine with a fat meal has less carbohydrate load for your organism. You know, the more carbohydrates, and that's interesting, that the French have a significantly higher percentage of fat in their diet and have a 4-year longer life expectancy than Central Europeans or Germans or Americans, which of course has incredibly pushed its carbohydrate content and reduced the fat content, of course, at the expense of a metabolic economy and obesity. So overweight. And the whole issue of diabetes and metabolic diseases has increased so rapidly that we are also talking about it in Central Europe today, that as a result of insulin resistance, every third person over the age of 60 has type 2 diabetes, which means they don't need insulin, but they have insulin resistance. It is difficult for the cell to have sugar available as an energy source. And the excess sugar is simply converted to fat. And this fat has a highly inflammatory effect on one's metabolism. Therefore, fat cells that are 20 times more exposed can be perceived with a warning index finger. And it's just not good. You have to be at your comfortable weight, and it may not be something which is just a mannequin figure, but really this excessive fat accumulated due to the high carbohydrate load in the problem areas, and especially abdominal fat, visceral fat, has a high pathogenicity. I think we've discussed this several times. You should really avoid that. And when I'm talking about fat here, I'm talking about the good and the valuable and the high quality. And for this, it is now necessary in the context of a wound healing or a skin regeneration disorder, and to get a new, let's say, structuring in your own diet, that you let these things out of your sight a bit. Because fat doesn't mean getting fat. It means bringing the body into a whole, much better energetic and metabolic regulatory function. The good LDL increases with it. Man has made good and bad out of it. HDL, LDL, but also the LDL is good, and it's the light fats that humans need. When that oxidizes, the LDL oxidizes, that's when it really becomes a problem. And that shouldn't be underestimated. But the good LDL and the good HDL are stabilized by these high-quality fats and are therefore available to the metabolism. Fat also means losing weight somehow. I have to make sources of energy available to the body. If I naturally minimize the fast energy carrier of carbohydrates, an optimal supply of fat means regulating my inflammation. You know that today we're talking about so-called silent inflammation. That is the highly sensitive CRP that we measure. And if that's over 1, then there's inflammation in the body, and you have to recognize it. This means that these silent inflammations are always present, even if we don't have any major health problems. But silent inflammation creates an imbalance tomorrow. Cell scars can develop from silent inflammation. They can increase permeability in the intestine and provoke leaky gut syndrome, for example. Silent inflammation can open the blood-brain barrier and much more. Fats, and especially phospholipids, but also omega-3, are brain nutrients. Please don't underestimate that. I sometimes wonder when people come into depression and their only therapy is antidepressant therapy, which might be building a bridge right now, which makes me calmer at the moment, makes me a little more relaxed, which lets me sleep again. But what about the brain nutrients? It is a problem that the body has a really unbelievable deficiency here. And the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, we'll get to that, has shifted in our daily lives in favour of omega-6. So if you eat too many carbohydrates and therefore stimulate too much fat production in the liver, then the liver is filled with connective tissue cells. So we say fat cells, but these are not fat cells. These are connective tissue cells. And what is the end of this connective tissue replacement? The function of these connective tissue cells is not the same as a liver cell. The liver, and you know that as devoted Visite viewers, that the liver watches over us. And of course the liver, with its over 500, 600, 700 tasks, is essentially having a say how our whole metabolic economy regulates itself. And I saw a nice card the other day. A child is holding out its hands and a little bird is sitting in there. And sometimes life is such that we have to wait for the bird to sit on it patiently. But my thoughts with this picture were the loving care. Maybe this child is taking care of this bird because maybe it can't fly anymore. But this loving care, that is ours alone, to supply the body sufficiently with this arsenal, including high quality fats. That's our job. And if there is a lack of it, then especially in a season that takes twice as much effort to maintain a body temperature, in order to maintain regeneration, we of course have to deal with the consequences. The polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3, are essential. Essential means I cannot produce them from my metabolic processes, and these are the main regulators for our entire immune metabolism, for nerve metabolism, for the cell membranes, that a cell membrane can also communicate. If a skin cell can no longer communicate, it is not capable of regeneration. To do this, it needs communication via phospholipids, via cholesterol. That means we are talking about linolenic acid, which is contained in vegetable oils, for example, and nuts, seeds and cold-pressed oils have this linolenic acid, and alpha-linolenic acid is a form of omega-3 fatty acids contained in yolk. Egg yolk is also quite rich in phospholipids, or macadamia nuts and walnuts. This means these essential fatty acids then have to be converted into DHA and EPA in the body. That means it must be able to carry out this transformation. It makes no sense to eat too much linseed oil and too many nuts, but maybe to offer it the already ready solution. And these are especially cold water fish. Mackerel, herring, salmon, game from grazing animals, venison from forest animals, beef from grazing animals. So these are very important sources that you should take in right now at this time of year. On the other hand, there is one food that is incredibly rich, and it is like a treasure of micronutrients. It contains all the B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B6, B12. It contains the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K, and E. Incredibly anti-inflammatory. It contains lutein, zeaxanthin. These are antioxidants that we also need for eye regeneration health. It contains selenium, it contains iron, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. And I'm talking about eggs. There are people who have problems with eggs and egg whites, but don't underestimate the high quality yolk. The egg becomes a life, becomes a living being. That means all scaffolding materials are in the egg, which we also need for life. It is good not to always fry eggs, but to poach them or boil them, for example. But they have an incredibly high nutritional value. And elevated cholesterol does not come from eggs. Eggs contain cholesterol without question. The high cholesterol, the shift in our lipid metabolism is significantly, and there is enough scientific research triggered by the carbohydrates that we consume additionally. We give patients with neurodegenerative diseases up to 6, up to 8, up to 10 yolk days, and we control the fat metabolism, and we don't let anyone rush into anything irresponsibly. But don't underestimate this source of lecithin, phospholipids for brain health and for regeneration. And what is, of course, very important if you consume oils, and especially high quality olive oil or good linseed oil, buy it in small bottles, dark bottles, and chill it. It does not have to be in the fridge, but cool and protected from light. Otherwise, these oils will go rancid. I'm someone who advocates good butter. Simply out of experience, a food is always of high quality when little happens to it. You can't do much with butter. Butter has the highest smoke point. That's what it's called. When you heat butter, that's about 163 to 191 degrees. Ghee, the Indian butter substitute, where the liquid has already been removed, has a smoke point of 204 to 260 degrees. So take the ghee butter maybe for frying, but otherwise a butter fat. And never heat oils either, because then trans fats bind, and trans fats have an incredibly negative effect on our metabolism. Trans fats are truly negative fats, and these negative fats are created in all frying processes. And you can imagine, and our food industry is full of all these things. The per capita consumption of fat in 1900 or around 1900 was about 8 kilos per capita consumption, and has come down to 1.9 today. This means the importance of a quality diet, and the most important is always also eating animal fat through pasture cattle, butter, a pasture butter. The animals must be fed with grass. That is the extreme big difference. Butter must be really pure yellow. Then it also has the highest proportion of omega-3. Treat yourself a little lovingly. Have a little more courage for all these things. Feel good, feel carried, feel warm. Create these energy reserves. And I can recommend a very nice book that Erica Richter wrote years ago with Ilse Gutjahr, and that is called Strokes. And you have an incredible number of wonderful recipes in this book with what delicious spreads you can make with good butter. The butter is whipped until very fluffy, and then there's onion butter, marjoram butter, garlic butter, sweet spreads, savoury in the most beautiful forms, and with great bread. And I refer here to our Good Doctor's Kitchen Talk show, which can show you a lot of good bread recipes in this regard. This is actually a very tasty and incredibly beautiful snack or breakfast or dinner. Please always remember avocado when we talk about fat. Avocado is high in high quality saturated fats, but also vitamin E has an anti-inflammatory effect, And eating an avocado is incredibly good for you. Maybe an avocado cream at the next family party, which you then prepare. You not only have to crush the avocado, but also beat it properly into a cream. And then with lemon juice, orange juice, maybe with a bit of isomalt or xylitol, maybe a bit of honey too. But this is an incredibly interesting, beautiful cream, which I believe everyone enjoys, even if they are not really familiar with. But invaluable at this time of year. With this in mind, I wish you just a little more courage. If up to now you regarded this a little unlovingly, because you just maybe didn't know any better, but I just ask you to think much more about it this time of year, and simply to observe what the body succeeds in doing again and again, and that maybe it was the last winter when you had these problems again and again on a symptomatic level and had to suffer and endure what you don't have to, because a symptom calls us that we should look deeper. With that in mind, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm already looking forward to the next episode with you. All the best.